Hey everyone, a really big welcome to today's final balancing act session of the year. And today we're tackling a really big subject with two amazing people, and it's on bullying and young people. And I'm sure we'll kind of dive into different avenues off of that, or rabbit holes as I like to call them. But that's a really good starting point, what we're going to be talking about today. So this session is being recorded until 45 minutes in, and then we will turn the recording off and come back to the live room for any questions with the confidentiality of the room. If you're watching on the recording or listening on the audio, then I'll give you a place to reach us at the end of the session should you have any questions, or given the sensitivity of the topic, if you want to be able to have a private conversation with myself, Helen, or Paula, we can absolutely do that for you as well. So my name is Nick Elston. I'm an inspirational speaker on the lived experience of mental health and a transformational speaking coach. Because I do stay in my lane of that lived experience angle and share my experiences and insights around mental health, mental illness, then I very much surround myself with amazing people, and today is absolutely no different. Myself and my business, Forging People, we work in lots of different spaces, lots of different organizations, right across the board, from people leaders to the media to frontline environments such as the military and police, fire service, and the medical services. Lots of different environments, the prison system, and I guess more relevantly today, the education system. Being the big hairy guy that I am, I tend to get airdropped into the people that don't tend to engage in stuff. And for me, actually, there's a real commonality with the topic that we're talking about today and the people that can experiences those extremes of life as well. Forging People actually came from a line in one of my early talks that in life we can either allow our adversities and our challenges and all the things that we experience in life to negatively impact us for the rest of our days. Or maybe it can forge something better, something beautiful, something powerful, something that wouldn't have existed without going through your stuff in the first place. And to me, that's kind of where it makes sense. I purely do share that lived experience angle. So, as I said, I surround myself with amazing thought leaders, speakers, and influencers, ethically, morally, and for insurance purposes, so that they can share their insights alongside my lived experience insights as well. And if I ever do release that country music album, this will be the cover. Hold your breath. So first up, we have Helen Taylor-Brimson. So good, they named her 3 times. Big round of applause for Helen.
Hello,
Helen, do you want to
everyone.
introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Helen. I'm a behavioural change therapist. I work quite a lot with Nick, but I generally work with people, individuals, and businesses, and I have worked in schools as well, helping people in all manner of kind of mental ill health and mental well-being as well. So sort of educating a bit more on what's going on in the brain and why we do the things that we do, and how we can actually use what we know about neuroscience to actually change the way that we want to perceive or do things in life. So actually changing neuropathways, so that we have a better mentally healthy perspective on life. And so, yeah, so that's me.
Thank you very much, Helen, and great to have you here again. Thank you very much. Then we have Paula Timms. Now, Paula and myself crossed paths at the Barnardo's conference in North Wales earlier this year, and just instantly hit it off. And I thought, I've got to bring her to my audience. So here you go, ladies and gentlemen, Paula Timms. Woo! Paula, no.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm a little bit old now. I've got 30 years experience in the children's sector. So I've been working in early years, education, health and social care for the last 30 years. In everything from education, mental health, family support, everything that you would encompass within children and family work, really. More recently, CEO at Kidscape, which is a bullying prevention charity. And it's really the culmination of all the rest of the work that I've been doing with children and young people over these years that's coming together now to focus on one particular area. I'm a huge champion of children's voices and people's voices and lived experience, which is probably why we hit it off so well, Nick. I think I'm genuinely authentic in terms of I'm not the expert. I have the privilege of tapping into so many experts on the ground. But I have the the privilege of being in a position where I can share voices and amplify people's experiences, whether that be the people that work with children and people, parents, or children and people themselves. So you'll often hear me referring to what children and people tell us is, and that's really where I get my expertise from. I'm by no means an expert myself.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Lovely to be here, Nick.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really pleased that you're here. Thank you. So, balancing acts, what we tried to do with these series of sessions over this year has been to take a real kind of four-dimensional human experience kind of approach to these things, not just a straight presentation, just a really open conversation between three people with three different experiences and insights and specialisms, and also obviously with our audience here. So if you are watching on the YouTube channel or through the audio, again, please do reach out to us. Any questions you have after here, we will give you a place to reach us. So I guess let's really kick off with the foundation stone of all this. We've decided to take the approach of speaking more about young people today, although we know bullying can be anybody or any situation. In fact, I was speaking at an organization last week where somebody very openly stood up and spoke about their previous experience of being bullied in a professional role. This is such a huge subject, so I'm sure we will revisit this in terms of kind of more, should we say, adult or senior or professional settings. But given our understanding of the youth environment and schools and education that you both have, we really want to understand bullying. So I guess, Paula, if we can start with you, how do we kind of define different forms of bullying and the impact that it can have on young people in terms of like development and mental health and stuff?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So there is no legal definition of bullying. So we currently use a definition that's been developed by an association of Anti-Bullying Alliance. So the way in which we all work together for bullying prevention. And it's in a sense, essentially is an act of harm to someone that's repeated, that's meant to be harmful or by intent. It can be from a person or a group of people to an individual or group, and it's repeated. So it's that repetitiveness that you're looking for, and there's a perceived imbalance of power at play, and that's a really tricky one that we often discuss with schools and with groups that come to us about bullying in their setting, because the perceived imbalance of power, the person that's receiving that behaviour can feel that they're powerless, but actually for other people they don't look like they are in that situation. So you will often hear about people saying, but they're a very confident child, or they're a popular child in the class, or what these children are saying about them isn't true. So why are they impacted? But it's the way in which the bullying impacts you that affects and affects you in your ability to respond to it.
Yeah.
The other thing to really understand about bullying is that it's a behaviour. And with my kind of early years and education development head on, we know behaviours can change. So, that's where the hope sits, is that often bullying is a behaviour that happens between children. It's something that they're learning. They're learning about friendships. They're learning about how to deal with conflict and friendships. And so therefore, with the right support, the hope is that the bullying behaviours can change, and that we try not to label people as the bully or the victim or the perpetrator. We focus on the fact there's a behaviour, and behaviour can change.
Thank you. And Helen, I guess, so you've, in your experience, your many experiences, you have teaching and support, working in schools with young adults that have either very challenging past or experiences or behaviours. You've kind of seen this firsthand. I guess also from your brain boffin, as I like to call you, point of view, why do some children or young adults fall into that trap of bullying? Is that a primal, natural thing? And if any of these questions seem stupid, by the way, I just want to ask open, honest questions. So, is it a primal kind of natural thing that has to be educated out, or actually is it something that is a control mechanism, maybe gone out of scope?
So essentially, as Paula said, bullying is about an imbalance of power. So, if you go evolutionary, it's about control, about sort of who has more power. If somebody wants something, then they're going to use that kind of control in order to manipulate what they want. It also comes down to, as the children get older, so we go into sort of teenage years, through puberty and stuff, it then starts to be part of reproduction, actually. So that kind of who's the hierarchy in there. So so it is this like imbalance of power that somebody wants. Interestingly, I was listening to a podcast not long ago, and they were talking that actually it's normally your peers, so somebody on your level or somebody above, but it will never be somebody from sort of where you are, sort of underneath, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So, and again, it's that perceived imbalance, difference, and whether that is that they're using differences in order to create that perception of power and control over someone.
And this isn't necessarily an in-person physical threat. This can be an online situation, a virtual situation. How does the kind of dynamics play out in that sense, where somebody is being bullied online? In terms of, is it again? I can understand the control kind of relation, but is it due to kind of you see a lot of things about extortion, blackmail, and that kind of stuff? Is it that kind of element that comes into play as the power control?
I think is that to me?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah. I think that, there's lots of reasons why people will bully online. It's just the same as being in person, really. Probably slightly easier because you have less sort of understanding of how that other person's receiving it. So you can amplify the kind of the behaviour, actually. So it can actually be a lot worse online because there's no response. So if you have, even like the smallest part of empathy, if somebody is quite clearly, falling apart in front of you, then you will tailor, albeit slightly less. But if online, there's the barrier, so they wouldn't, it makes no difference. So that perception of power, and of course, once we feel like we're more powerful, that's when corruption happens. And we see that a lot, that, in the adult world, we see how power can corrupt our behaviours. So, so then it kind of escalates from there, really.
Thank you. And Paula, in your role, as kind of time has gone on, also through Kidscape generally as well, have you seen that kind of balance of having in-person situations versus the online situations? How has that kind of expanded over the course of the years?
I mean, it is a very real problem, and I think we really need to understand what that problem looks like. From what we know of the research that's available, bullying online, so as opposed to other online harm and abuse, bullying online is often, mostly, an extension of bullying in face-to-face situations. Okay. So what happens though is it becomes amplified, as Helen says, and escalated quite quickly. So if you can imagine a scenario where an incident would happen in a classroom or a school corridor and it's repeated, once, there's probably a kind of a collective of a handful of children who've witnessed that. Once it goes on to online, the way in which children use their online world at the moment, so there could be 1,000 children that see it instantly.
Yeah.
So there is that perception of it being more people are doing it, or that more people are aware of it, and for the person who's receiving the bullying, that's often the point where they don't know where to turn.
Yes.
And in fact, there was a piece of research out recently that said 38% of children that are bullied online never tell a soul. And that's quite difficult to understand, isn't it? Because of the kind of stigma and shame that might carry. And And so that's what's the biggest difference for me is, in terms of what children tell us, is that there's this feeling of there's nowhere else to go once it becomes an online issue. And so we do really need to tackle that, and we need to really understand that we're talking in this scenario about bullying online and an extension, and it's mostly their peers. Again, exactly what you've just said, we've just described, but it's often peer on peer, and then that isn't about strangers. That's different to an online harm or abusive situation that might be a different issue. And that's really what's changed for us in society at the moment, compared to, say, when we were younger and there was a bullying situation, and it would go away by its own accord at some point because it would fizzle out. That's what's more challenging.
Thank you.
I guess the big thing for that as well is that when it's online, like old school, not that it was ever better, but we would go home to our own homes. We could shut the front door and we could actually get some respite from it. But I guess now with it being online, it just it doesn't stop.
Yeah, thanks.
And we're seeing an increase in calls from our parent advice line, where children are talking about, I don't want to label it because the terminology isn't helpful, but where they're being ostracized, or what's the right word? Or singled out, and people are not responding to them, or they're deleting them from their accounts, or because something's happened at some point, and that, I can imagine that feeling. I can't imagine that feeling actually, of suddenly all of the world as you know it suddenly not wanting to talk to you.
I mean that's certainly a rabbit hole that we can't go down today, but I'd love to go down with today. So I think certainly there's a big relationship with that, and the general kind of cancel culture kind of elements feeding through. But definitely we'll come back to that subject for a session next year for sure. You mentioned empathy, Hels, and I think that's something that's really important. I want to break it down into a couple of things. The first thing I want to ask you both, and Paula, from an education point of view, how can people in education, how can educational establishments create supportive environments? And then I'm going to come to you after Helen to speak about the kind of the family and the home environment, if that's okay. So, Paula, from your perspective in education, what can be done to support people that are experiencing bullying?
Yeah. So the first thing, and I talk on a few of these podcasts, the first thing I say to anybody, if you work in education, is accept that it's happening. Because the worst thing we can do is say, oh, we don't have that issue in our school. If we're saying that around 1 in 4 children experience bullying, and this is chronic bullying, as in it's happening, regularly, then it's definitely happening in your classroom, your school, your club, if you're a sports leader. So the first thing we need to do is acknowledge that it happens, and then how do we look for that? How do we create a culture which is safe, supportive, that we have those conversations in a real way, so that we're not blaming children, that we're educating children, and in the same way as we would have conversations about other developmental factors. It's really key that we create that culture early. And so my second message would be, get those relationships, kind of lessons in early in life, create that kindness, compassionate culture. Things like teachers role modeling behaviour, having very explicit rules about what is accepted and what isn't accepted in terms of your setting, your classroom, your school, how, having avenues available for children to share concerns.
Yeah.
Who do they go to? Is that a photo on the wall? Is that someone that's available in a classroom? And when they go to share the concerns, that they will be listened to and heard and believed.
Yeah.
We've recently launched a report with Natalie Norrit at the University of York around trauma and bullying. And one of the key takeaways for me for children and people has been the bullying was bad enough. Not being believed it was happening was really traumatic. I then had nowhere. I had nobody. So I think it's really important, create a culture of kindness, compassion, acceptance of behaviour. And then what do you do when things happen? How do you respond to that? And just having that in a very open and transparent way, including involving parents and community members, as I'm sure Helen is going to talk about now as well.
I think it's kind of, you're right, and thank you so much for that. Some great insights there. That I think by rolling that model out, not only do you support the bullied, but you also address the bullies, and I think that's kind of the thing. A lot of the from the research I've done and the conversations I have in schools, and as I said, I tend to get airdropped into kids that have had a very poor start in life, even through to victims of domestic abuse and stuff, which is going to a different thing. But for me, it's recognizing that addressing just the victim in any sense is only really half the battle, isn't it? No one really speaks about kind of how do we address the actual bullies. That you'll hear about that being reported to schools, and they'll address the bullied, but not really address the bullies in that sense, other than a disciplinarian kind of approach. So I think the environment that you just showcased would help everybody, wouldn't it?
Oh, completely. And, you know, I speak to adults on a daily basis about their experiences when they were children, young people, about bullying. Either that they were bullied, or in fact, some people are brave enough to tell me I had a really difficult childhood and I was the bully and it was my survival mode. You know, what we know about trauma, that we're learning so much about, aren't we? And that's so much about how, you know, especially boys that are in a situation where they're, you know, in a pupil referral unit or not in education, they're fighting at life, aren't they? They're battling. And often these behaviours are a result of, you know, things that have happened to them, and they're in survival mode. And it's a case of, I've got to be at the top of the game here, otherwise something's going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Or there's that fear that if they don't correspond to what's happening in a group situation or a gang situation, that again, it's going to be happened to me. I will be the person that's harmed. So it's really important that we, as I say, put that lens on around the behaviour being the problem and not the child.
Yeah.
And therefore we can change the behaviours in that group dynamic.
What you described there, I see so much in the prison system as well. That there's this kind of the label that you attribute to people that are in prison, for example, or in this case, the bullies. But actually, by hearing their experiences, you can actually realise that maybe they're one twist turn conversation away from going a whole different path altogether. So it's really interesting. I mean, a lot of this stuff then would stem from our family units, our upbringing, our conditioning in that sense. And Helen, that's absolutely your kind of sweet spot. I mean, talk to us about the personal element of this, the personal supportive environment.
Well, yeah, I mean, we all know that, you know, that feeling supported and heard and loved and all those things are sort of fundamental to us as humans anyway. And you're right, you know, it's about believing people. You know, if your, you know, son or daughter or comes home, or the person that you're supporting comes home and they say that, you know, these things are happening, then, you know, you believe first. And, you know, because even if, so perception is also another thing. What one person may perceive as being, oh, don't worry about it, may cut deep for somebody else. So just because our own perception of something is maybe different, it doesn't mean to say that what somebody's explaining to us isn't being, you know, fundamentally having a huge, you know, impact on our well-being. So actually, it's like listening without that judgment, and that's across the board always.
Yeah.
And actually teaching our children self-compassion. So because we know that when we're a bit more compassionate to ourselves, and we have a better ability to be compassionate to other people. So it's about kind of, you know, making sure that we are helping and supporting our children right from the very start. And, you know, there will always be an element of bullying. I think that's just one thing. We're never going to eradicate this, because again, it's, there's lots of different factors within sort of bullying, but actually on the whole, this kind of, to stop the spread of it, is about, teaching our family and our children and the people that are supporting our family, what's good, what's, how to be empathetic, how to help and support people, to have open dialogue, to talk about things that are a bit difficult. Yeah. So it's not seen as taboo, but so that people really feel that they can say what they need to say. Because the worst thing is so many children don't. And it's not until they reach crisis point. So even if you don't think anything's happening, it's just having those, those conversations with them and check-ins on a regular basis.
But
to
sorry,
no, go on. Just
I was going to say we've spoken about. I love what you were saying then, but the role modeling thing that we've mentioned. Again, as a non-specialist, just asking dumb questions, because that's kind of my thing, and I love doing that thing. Asking a question that actually, if you hear that your child or the person that you protect is being bullied, very often that natural reaction could be pure rage. It's pure emotion that you want to go and physically do something about that yourself. And if you're not being heard at school, and we've spoken about kind of school environments and stuff, that's really hard to manage and role model whilst being protective at the same time, I would guess. I mean, I'm dad to a small Shih Tzu, so I've got no context whatsoever. But I'm just going to put myself in a situation, if it was one of my young family members being bullied, it induces that rage, surely, and that's really difficult, right?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly know my son had some incidents, and Mama Bear wants to come out and sort of do the whole rage thing, but that's not useful. And actually, we need to be really careful that we don't, again, put those assumptions on. It's about having that dialogue and that conversation with your child or the person that you're caring for. Is like, okay, so what's going on, what's happening, what are your fears, how can we help, what's going to be useful? Because going in, like a 10-ton truck into a situation isn't going to be helpful for anyone, because we also don't know the whole story. So we need to support, but equally we need and manage and stay as level-headed as possible, whilst being protective. Yes, it can be quite challenging in the fact that you've got a lot of emotions going on, but this is again comes down to the parents sort of leading by example, that there's acknowledging the pain and the fear of their son or daughter, or the person that they're caring for. But equally knowing that, okay, what else is going on around here? What is the whole thing, without jumping to conclusions? It's about encouraging an open dialogue, because one of the worst things that I've seen is that actually we can go in, try and stop the bully, and that's fine for a couple of weeks because everybody's watching out. But when everyone starts to pitter away and they think everything's fine, it ramps up and it's twofold. And so we need to, this is a long-term strategy. So actually it's really important about, the way that we move forward.
Thank you. The next session I want to kick off for you, Helen, is the mental health impact of this. So I know you work with young people, and also as a therapist as well. You work with young people that have experienced things like depression, even suicidal thoughts. There's a staggering rise in young mental health of the young. I was looking at a US study, actually. It was spoken about through the Rainn Wilson podcast, Soul Boom, and it's staggering the amount of challenges that are coming through, not just from constant connection, but also through things like bullying. I mean, what do you see with young people that are coming to you for help or being brought to you for help? What do you see in them? What are the kind of commonalities? What are people feeling?
Well, I think it kind of, what Paula said really resonated in the fact that they feel there's nowhere to go there, and it is that there's nowhere to hide. If you're in school, or you're in clubs or whatever, and then you've got your phone, it can be everywhere, and that's really difficult. So I see it's quite intense, and also we're all quite a lot more aware. There's lots of, we can Google lots of stuff, and that's not helpful either, because then all the algorithms give us all this information. So actually sometimes, I have children come and they have so much information, they're overwhelmed by it, and don't actually understand what it means and what they need to do with this. And if they try these things and they're trying all these things that they're not getting anywhere with it, so they must be a failure. It feeds into that narrative that you start to get of, am I not good enough? So actually it's, they're being bombarded. I think that's the hardest thing, and I'm very grateful that I grew up in a time where there wasn't this bombardment of information overload and kind of not being able to shut the door. So that's very real in kind of what I see, is that, where do they find that space where they can actually, get the headspace in order to process what's going on, in order to find ways to kind of manage their way through it. That's why lots of children come through my door, because I can give that space in that sense for them. But yeah, and sleep's then disturbed, and it goes on.
Thank you. I know, Paula, at the Barnardo's conference, we were talking about kind of, it's also important to stress that you can have the right environment for success or love or happiness, whatever those things mean to you. But actually, very often, if these things can happen, maybe if you're a little different, if you feel, look, act a little differently, it's not just about the environment, the family unit. It can actually just be a situation that arises due to even a slight difference. And in the context of Barnardo's, we were talking about the care system, and I shared about my family upbringing was through the foster system and stuff, and that's a really important thing to mention. But tell me about your experiences with kind of bullying and mental health from yours and Kidscape's perspective, please.
Yeah, you're right. So often bullying is around targeting of a perceived or a real difference. So it's random, children will get bullied because of their colour, their race, religion, their background, the smell, the look, all sorts, the way they behave. So it does impact on, particular groups that we know are more vulnerable to bullying. And therefore, they're often children that are already carrying quite a lot of baggage, as we say, a lot of the traumas that they've already got, those in the care system. They're already trying to kind of fight for survival. Or, children that have moved into the area or got a different language or a different kind of voice, whatever it would be.
Yeah.
And so we know long term that bullying can impact on your confidence, your self-esteem, and obviously then in the wider system, it will impact on your ability to attend school, achieve in school, what life choices you have, whether you do the job that you really want to do. And I talk to many adults who have been impacted by bullying. On a plus side, there is hope. I speak to lots of ambassadors. We've got lots of ambassadors who were bullied as children, quite chronically, and it's helped shape them. They are the most amazing, empathetic adults, and they work in creative industries, etc. So, there is hope. What I would say is that it's really important, therefore, to acknowledge and equip children, young people with the skills to manage that. In the same way that we would equip children, young people with generally nowadays post-pandemic around mental health and well-being. And it's okay to acknowledge those feelings of anxiety and friendship breakdown, etc. So one of our top searches online is young people on our website. We're a safe place for young people to come and get help, if there are any young people listening to this, about friendships and bullying and what they can do and how they can equip themselves and deal with those feelings. Just to remember that around 1 in 4 children are going through the same thing. So chances are, if you've got a friendship group of 6 children, that there's a couple of them are probably experiencing something similar. So please tell other people. There's nothing to be ashamed of, and help is there. It does help to talk about this.
Thank you. This is, of all the episodes we've done and all the subjects that we covered this year, this has been the one that has had the most interest, both on a personal level and professional level, from people that have spoken to me. So really looking forward to your episode on bullying when it hits YouTube, that kind of stuff. And I know already this is going to be shared out through 3 of the schools that I work with, because again, it just seems to be having a human conversation around this doesn't seem to happen too much. It's either come from a clinical point of view or a fixed point of view, but not really from a human discussion. I want to have a really open conversation with you both about how do you both effectively communicate to, or give parents and teachers the tools to communicate around this. What kind of advice would you give? I know you, and also showcase the tools that Kidscape has as well, please, Paula. So,
Yes.
Helen, do you want to go first on this one, Helen?
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is about enabling our children to be able to speak up. Because actually, like, one of the things, so I'm always going to come from a kind of brain point of view on this, but so one of the things that we do when we internalize stuff, our brain really struggles with the difference between imagination and reality. So whatever's happening to us, if we're having that dialogue inside, internally, we're creating, and our brain's wired, as we know, sort of towards the negative. So we start to increase the intensity of that, of what's happening. It doesn't mean it's not happening or it doesn't feel that, but actually it's intensifying. So the more that we keep it in our head and the more that we don't say anything, the worse it gets. We know that the moment that we can actually externalize that kind of like verbally or whatever, it actually releases that kind of energy from it. So the more that we can actually have these conversations or get young people to a place where they feel comfortable and safe enough to have these conversations, that's the game changer. That's the thing that's going to start the process off in order for them to kind of move forward. It's so important to be able to create safe spaces for people where they can come and talk and come and say what they need to. And Nick, this is one of the things that you do really well, is that, explaining your situation. So having like mentors that are happy to talk about these things, like for you, the moment you start to talk about the things that you've struggled with through your life, that opened up a whole world of people that just went, oh my goodness, I can say this, it's okay. And that's really effective. That is so effective and can be life-changing for people. So creating like safe spaces where people can actually open up and say, people aren't going to be able to afford therapists for their children or whatever, but actually finding really good, charities that have these kind of groups where their children can go, are supported, or even with family members. But it's definitely the first port of call is helping the person that you're supporting verbalize what's going on. So actually, starting that open line of communication is key.
Thanks, Helen. I think you're right. I think lived experience is an amazing vehicle to get people to that point of at least having that conversation or verbalizing their thoughts and
you realize
for help.
You realize you're not on your own.
Absolutely.
That's huge, because you really do feel like that until you realize you're not.
Yeah, I see. Paula.
Yeah. So very similar. There's some very practical self-help things that you can do. I'm conscious, obviously, we're going into the school holidays, so children could feel isolated or parents feel a bit helpless to what's going to happen over the holidays. We run a parent advice line, and one of the things that we do through our website is advise parents and provide practical tips. We were talking earlier about that rage you have of you want to protect your child. We've got some very effective communication strategies. Things like writing down in a letter what's upset you, what your child has said, taking a friend with you to the school, arranging a meeting. Think about what difference you want to happen rather than just what the problem is. It's very useful. For children and young people, always try to see if there's a safe, trusted relationship, an auntie, an uncle, a friend, someone in school, someone in your football club. You can tell this is happening, as Helen said. It's a problem shared and it will help. Write things down. Keep a little journal. So important, because you can begin to think, did it happen? Did I make that up? Is it me? Have I done something? And it can just help you to put those thoughts to bed for you to go to sleep at night, really. What children and people say to us that have experienced this and got through bullying and resolved and been happy after a situation of bullying is often there's something about them finding their tribe, finding somewhere where they feel accepted, a sense of belonging, happiness with other people, a similar mind or interest. For example, if you're a boy that loves to dance, find a dance group. A girl that loves to play football, find a girls' football team. That sometimes can be the thing, especially thinking now about over the holiday period now. Who is your tribe? Who are the people that you trust? Who makes you feel valued and comfortable when you're in their company? And try and focus on that. And definitely something about like-minded peers, somebody that you can go to for a bit of advice. There's nothing better than an older young person to help you through a situation, can understand what you're going through.
Thank you so much, Paula. We'll make this a final point because I could talk to you two for hours, so it'll be the longest webinar ever. So we'll finish with this point, empowering young people. So I'm looking to discuss and kind of final wrap up with techniques to empower young people to stand up to bullying and to obviously to build resilience safely. Has to be said safely for sure. I kind of wanted to ask this question from a personal perspective, really, because I run a kind of speaking coaching program called Find Your Voice in schools. And it's amazing the amount of students that feel the courage to stand up and share their experiences, whether it's about sexuality, race, or gender, or identity. There's so many different things that people have to share, but very often keep in. And it's such a liberating experience. But I guess that the people that you really want to reach are the people that are keeping this stuff in, or the people that are being kept down for any reason. I guess if we can lean it towards how can we encourage people to open up, to help empower themselves, that'd be great. So again, open conversation, whoever wants to chip in first, I guess, to kick this off.
Go for it, Paula.
Well
volunteered.
Do you know, so before I came to Kidscape, I worked for a couple of years in children's rights. And so this is something that I'm really passionate about. But I have seen the most magical things happen when children are given the permission and the mandate to express themselves creatively in whichever modality they want to, whether that be art, poetry, some amazing poets, writing, journaling, public speaking. Now, some people are very good at public speaking but can't hold a conversation on a one-to-one basis. Everybody's very different. So I think there's something about creating environments, if you're an educationalist, to be able to give children and young people that opportunity and the mandate to do so and not be afraid of what's going to come through. Also, had some great examples in schools. And I can see Mark is on the call today from Wandsworth, but great examples where they have schemes in different schools and different local authorities whereby there's proper suggestion boxes and ideas and debates and things that can go in. Again, you can do these schemes anonymously, so you can say if there's issues in the school, children have got the opportunity to raise them. And then again, going back to that trusted adult, everybody needs a trusted adult, and that trusted adult could be a canteen person. It doesn't have to be a professional in the school team, and somebody that has got a good relationship with children at all sorts of levels, and therefore can be a place that they can go and talk to. So I would say, above all, is just making sure those lines of communication are available in whatever modality and time that children and people feel that they want to share their voices.
I love that. And again, it goes back to that kind of the leadership role, the mentor, whoever they may be. And it's myself and Helen have worked with some children's charities over the years where we kind of use this Find Your Voice program. And it's amazing that once you have trust and rapport with people, with young people, they will engage in everything and they will stand up and they will share very openly. But it's finding that trust and rapport. They have so many powerful stories to tell and powerful experiences that very often they don't see the value of their experiences. They're defined negatively by them as opposed to something that can set them free. And I guess, Helen, that leads me on nicely to the question I want to kind of ask you around, I guess, neurodiversity and where this comes into the mix as well, given your specialism and passion in neurodiversity.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, if we want to empower our young people, it's like playing to their strengths, as we say, seeing whatever tools they have right now and whoever they are. It's like, what superpower comes out of that, through all that we do, through all that, anyone ever experiences. We learn so many things. We have an incredible tendency to kind of reflect negatively on stuff, and we very, very rarely do we constantly look forward, future, that kind of solution focus way. How can we use this in a more positive way? What's a better outcome for this? So actually, empowering, our young children to actually look at, what has happened, but actually, how do we want to use this in order for us to propel ourselves forward? What skills have we learned? Because when we start to understand the skills that we're learning and and the tools we're creating, the more we feel empowered by our own self. So actually understanding that we are, that we have that strength and that courage and those amazing things that children have and young people have, because they don't get bogged down by the adult world, and it's like allowing that to be expressed is really powerful.
Absolutely, thank you. Paula, any parting wisdom for you before we come back?
I think I just want to leave some messages of hope, really, that if you're a child, young person, or parent listening to this podcast, that to remember that there's always choices. Things can always change, and even if you're heading into a couple of weeks off school, when you go back, things could be so different. So focus on the positives and the things that are really good in your life. And then in terms of adults, just remembering to have that safeguard, go back to that basic safeguarding lens, and treat this as a bullying issue as a safeguarding concern, and that you believe the child in the first instance, and then you look at the situation and the environment and how you can adapt and amend, the environment to support children and make sure that all of the children are kept safe from harm, is effectively the simplest thing you can do, and just to believe children when these things come to you.
Thanks so much, Paula. And Helen?
So very much echoing what Paula says, but also finding that hope. So actually, looking at it in a much more forward-looking way. So supporting, listening without judgment is so important, and that just because what you perceive, I think, for when you are supporting children, what you perceive to be might not be to them. So actually, actively listening to what they're saying, because that's really important. But also, having that positive reflection. What can we learn from this? How do we want to move forward? So always keeping that hope. Hope's so important. And if it's not there, it's finding that, like being curious with your children about it.
Thanks so much, Helen. And thank you both for being here today. Amazing insights. I've learned so much. So I know everybody else will as well. We're going to come back to the live room now for any questions. But if you are watching on the recording, you can reach myself, Helen, or Paula at nick@nickelston.com, and I'll make sure that reaches the right person. Helen, where can people find you directly?
Oh, it's Helen at brainworkshypnotherapy.co.uk. That's my email, and you can find me online at brainworkshypnotherapy.co.uk.
Awesome. Paula?
And I have a Kidscape email, so it's paula@kidscape.org.uk. I'm on LinkedIn and social media, so please just look us up. Or our website, Kidscape.
Amazing. Thank you. I am on LinkedIn, not on any other social media platform. That's a mental health protection thing. And this also will be available on YouTube too. The website has lots of different links and different content as the podcast will enter season 8 in 2025. So stay tuned. But I'm going to come back to the room now for any live questions, stop the recording. But again, thank you very much to Paula and Helen for being here.